Hey y'all, I'm still down out in the parking lot. He just messaged and said they were waiting on an MRI and they just pulled a bunch of fluid and blood and stuff off his knee, so it's going to be a process. But anyway, as I was sitting here, I was reflecting back in time, and I remembered another story that the Lord had told me about birds. And this was, I was at work one day and I had a few minutes for lunch, so I ran out and just ran through McDonald's and got me a cheeseburger and some fries and a drink, and I rolled over into the parking lot and parked where there was some hedge bushes. And I noticed there was some birds in there, and so I would eat a fry and I'd throw them the other half of it, and I'd eat a fry and throw them the other half of it. And so I was just having a good time watching those birds. But the Lord had a different idea. He had something He wanted to teach me there. And those little birds came, you know, the mama bird, there's this mama bird just flies out of nowhere and sits down on the parking lot, and she's got her babies with her. And there's like 4 or 5 of these little babies, and they're just chirping those little mouths and flapping those little wings on the concrete. And the Lord spoke to me, and He said, those little baby birds represent my people. I said, sir? He said, those birds represent my people. He said, those little baby birds are like newborn babes in Christ. He said, just when I get to feeding them what they need to hear, he said, they get to chirping that little mouth and flapping those little wings, and they can't hear what I'm saying. And I was like, oh, wow, God, I'm sorry. I've been that little bird so many times. So anyway, it just kind of went on for a while, and I was just sitting there enjoying it. So I went back to work, and I told everybody at work what the Lord had said, and they looked at me like I had 2 heads. But it was really a special moment for me. So the next day I had another break, and you know where I went? Straight back to McDonald's. I really would have liked to went to Wendy's and got the fat fries, but there just wasn't time. So I went back because this time I got 2 orders of fries, one for them and one for me. So I went back in the same parking spot, and I started feeding the birds again. And all of a sudden, this mama bird comes back, and she flies right back down. The little baby birds are still with her, and they're still chirping, and she's still feeding them the meaty part of that French fry. And all of a sudden, this big old black bird comes and sits right down between them. And the mama bird flies over to the curb, and the little baby birds fly out to the parking lot. And I just sitting there looking at that old black bird like it was the devil himself. I knew what he represented. And the Lord spoke to me again. He said, and just when I get to feeding them what they need to hear, he said, Satan drops in and he tries to separate them from me. He said, but watch what happens. And those little baby birds picked up and flew over that blackbird and sat down on the curb beside their mama. And the Lord said, you see, my people will always return to where they're being fed. And you know, that was just a powerful word for me from Him. That we do that, you know, when we do get saved, we are excited and we want more and more and more, and we want it faster than we want to grow faster than we can grow. Because, you know, when we get saved, the Word talks about that we need milk and honey before we can get into the meat of the Word. We've got to learn the basics. If you're new in the Lord, I want to encourage you to read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You know, I had a customer one time who came in, and she said, Sharon, I just have so much trouble reading the Bible. She said, you know, everybody tells me just to read the Bible, read the Bible. She said, and I do. She said, I've tried to. She said, but I bet I've read Genesis more than anybody in the whole wide world. I said, quit reading Genesis, baby. Start reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and find out what He did for you. And quit concentrating on why He did what He did back then. And so anyway, that was just a good moment for me to reflect and enjoy what He had to say, and I loved every minute of it. And I just wanted to share that with y'all because there's been so many supernatural things that God has allowed me to see, and I don't know why. other than I ask him. And you know what? He'll answer you if you ask him to. If you'll really get into an attitude of prayer and praise and worship. That day I wasn't even in an attitude of praise and worship. I was sitting there talking to him and just enjoying nature, take its course. Watching those baby birds, knowing he had created them. And that's a beautiful thing. But sometimes we just have to be quiet and be still and listen. There was a time when I told some of my friends when I first got saved, I said, I hear y'all talk about God told you this and God told you that. And I said, he ain't told me nothing. And they were like, Sharon, sometime you have to be quiet and listen. Oh, okay. So I did. I started being quiet and listening, especially when I was reading the Word and studying His Word. If we'll just be quiet and listen for that still small voice, He will speak to you. And He said, my sheep will know my voice. So I want to encourage you today to get into the Word and start reading. And, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it don't matter whether you're in Proverbs or the Psalms. Those are all uplifting chapters. But learning who Jesus is, it's all about Him and what He did for you and what He did for me. Y'all have a blessed day. Have a good Easter. And I love you. Later. Bye-bye.